Thank you for that, and I will speak quickly. Pope Francis is trained by the Jesuits, and one of the things the Jesuits talk about is reading the signs of the time and being practical within the times. The reality of it is that my original intervention was no longer purposeful to our conversation, so we're going live here to change it up. One of the things that has struck me in the conversation over the past couple of days is the relevance to the question of mission and margin. We all have missions, but we struggle to meet margins. And the reality of it is, without margin, there is no mission. Christians believe that money isn't evil. The love of money is evil. We need resources to do what we do, and we need them quickly, and we need them now. So I want to talk very briefly about my experience in politics. I worked 4 years for the former President of the United States, Barack Obama, and my experience in electoral politics and fundraising in this world to better give you a sense of how to communicate your story, who you are, what you do, what you believe in, as a catalyst for getting resources and scaling up. And I can talk in more detail later, but I want to talk about narrative creation and who you and the way you're doing your work within the Sustainable Development Goals. A few years ago, or earlier this month, I had an assignment in my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. The assignment was to create a letter for a time capsule for people that would open it 100 years from today. Now, reflect on the assignment for a second. These people, they know everything about you. You know nothing about them. And you're asked to communicate what is going on in your era. My background said I communicate the politics were going on in the United States with the election of Donald John Trump and the realities that Americans face today. But then I started reflecting more deeply upon the question and the realization that today, nation states across the globe have nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction ready for launch in any second at the strike of a finger. And the realization came to me that the people 100 years from now would know whether or not those missiles went off. And they will know as well whether or not you and I respond to these goals, these Sustainable Development Goals that have been proposed for us. I think it's important when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals that we're not talking first and foremost about the goals. The purpose of the goals is not self-perpetuation of the United Nations or even the goals. It's for people and the planet. Looking 100 years into the future of that letter, it makes it more clear that it's about people and the planet. So I propose quickly 3 things that I think can be helpful as we move forward to talk about who we are and what we're doing. Number 1, start from below. Pope Francis says, to whom should we go first when we spread good news? The poor, the forgotten, the outcast. Too often we talk about influencers. And the reality of it is, if the Sustainable Development Goals are going to be successful, they're going to have to be a populist movement from below, a grassroots movement. The notion that we can simply make an intellectual claim and move forward from it because we're the smartest people in the room hasn't been proven. I've seen it on the ground. I know that movements win when average men and women are involved in them. Intellectuals are a part of the story, but they aren't the carriers of the mission. The carriers of the mission are on the ground, and you and I have to remember that in our work. The second thing I'd like to say is the second reality that we must face is this question of to where do we go? Local versus global. Solidarity is an important mission, but it cannot be achieved without subsidiarity. Going to the individual, going to the reality of the individual's life. We have to have a movement that is focused on local communities, local people, and that they are the first ones in charge. And I want to kind of flesh this out for a second and why this matters in particular. We see time and again that in our current environment, we deal with the age of oxymorons, international nationalism, ideological populism. The environment is not good for the Sustainable Development Goals. We must acknowledge that. If we're going to win, and that's what I'm focused on, is winning and achieving these goals in the next 13 years, we have to win in the context of where we are and where we're planted. And we are in an age of global populism. To me, that means when you're conceiving your projects, you can't conceive it as only participation in a global initiative, but really 1,000,001 small projects that help build up the global mission. To go big, in this era, you have to go small. Small as possible. When you chase 2 rabbits, you don't catch either one. Be intensely focused. In the past 7 years, I've raised several millions of dollars for initiatives in the United States. And I've always found that donors care about, I would say, 2 things. One, are they sharing in a mission? Are they sharing in a mission that is compelling? Are they sharing in a mission that is thoughtful? And sharing in a mission that makes a difference? And the second question is, do I trust you to carry it? I have never received a check that I simply think is written for my organization. I think it's written because they trust me as an individual to be a carrier of that mission within the context of an organization. And it's really important, the ability to create a story. And the last point, we've been talking about the Greeks all week. The Greeks had 3 levels of persuasion that you learned about in your rhetoric classes at one point. Ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, are you a good person? Pathos, do you care about me? Logos, are you right? If we're going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to listen to the advice of the Greeks. They always said the logos comes last. Paul VI said it this way. Men and women today are much more willing to follow witnesses rather than to listen to teachers. And they will only listen to teachers if they are witnesses first. I think you're very smart. I think we're all very smart. I think the Sustainable Development Goals are right. But to be leaders in a movement, to gather resources and to move the ball forward, we need to convince people every day of the ethos and pathos of our work, that we are upstanding and that we care. I have an image. I'm not sure if it can be shown or not. I do a lot of work on the scholarship and the leadership of Pope Francis, and I'll end with this. Pope Francis obviously is a global leader of epic proportions, and his papacy has meant a lot. He says one of the biggest threats to global development is overeducated people. Starched, overeducated people who calmly talk about the matters of the world while sipping coffee, but do not encounter the flesh of those who are suffering. Pope Francis acts in ethos and pathos. The logic of his argument is compelling because of the witness of who the man is. It's the same with donors, too. I've seen it. When you get organizations and individuals and foundations to invest in you, it's because they sense your goodness and your care and your argument's correct. We know the Sustainable Development Goals are full of logos and wisdom. We need to convince people by our ethos and our pathos. Thank you.